Welcome, sleepy traveler. Tonight, let's drift far, far away, past the hum of modern fridges and the comforting glow of supermarket aisles. Let's glide softly into the dusty, sun-bleached streets of an empire that promised eternal glory, yet might leave you shivering and famished under the moonlight. But tell me, have you ever wondered why you, yes, you, would almost certainly starve to death in ancient Rome? You might imagine Rome as a bustling paradise of endless feasts, golden goblets of wine, juicy roasted boar, olives shimmering with oil under the sun. The emperors did love their banquets, it's true. But you, an ordinary visitor from the future, would soon find yourself in a far less appetizing situation. The first thing you'd notice is the smell. Ugh, the stench of fish guts rotting under the August sun, mingling with the sour wafts of fermented garum, that pungent fish sauce Romans loved to splash on everything. You'd pick your way down a cramped alley, careful not to slip on the oozing slop poured from chamber pots right onto the street. A chorus of stray dogs snarl at the scraps, their ribs jutting out like delicate pottery shards. You might be looking for bread, expecting a soft, fluffy loaf. But no, Roman bread was a heavy, gritty affair. Bakers mixed sawdust and ground up beans into the dough to stretch the precious wheat. With every bite, your modern teeth would crack on bits of stone from poorly milled grain. Some loaves even contained sand, either by accident or, in darker corners of the city, by design to trick the poor.
And water? You might imagine crystal fountains singing sweet songs in the moonlight. True, the aqueducts were an engineering marvel, but the water that trickled into the public fountains was far from pure. You'd share your sip with algae, dead rats, and all the filth that found its way into those grand marble basins. Let's not forget the grain dole, the famous annona, the state's gift of free wheat to the poorest citizens. In theory, you'd sign up and collect your share. In practice, good luck. You'd stand for hours in a sweating, cursing line, only to discover you don't have the right paperwork or connections. Maybe a corrupt official demands a bribe, or a local strongman muscles you aside. By the time you make it to the front, the grain might be gone, or worse, infested with weevils and mold. While patricians reclined on couches, dipping figs into honey, the vast majority of Rome's 1,000,000 inhabitants scrambled for survival. The plebeians, common folk, mostly lived in towering, flammable apartment blocks called insulae, where fires frequently swept through and roofs caved in during the night. You, trying to drift off to sleep after a meager dinner of onions and stale bread, would listen to rats rustling through your straw mattress.
Hunger wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a constant gnawing companion. Prices spiked with every harvest failure or shipment delay. In a bad year, even the thin barley porridge, pulse, might disappear from your bowl. Meanwhile, up on Palatine Hill, an emperor might be feasting on flamingo tongues and dormice stuffed with pine nuts. You might think, I'll just buy food at the market. But imagine the forum crowded with sweaty bodies, traders shouting over each other, pickpockets slipping hands into your tunic. The fish shown display glisten under the sun, but you know they were already rotting hours ago at the port. You can almost taste the sour tang in the air, mixed with the smell of goat dung and spilled wine. And yet, as you wander through this city of contradictions, you marvel at the mosaics glittering in hidden courtyards, the echo of sandals on marble, the faint music drifting from a distant banquet. In those brief moments, you might forget your empty stomach and feel the heartbeat of an empire that believed it would last forever. But tomorrow, when you wake up in your smoky, cramped room, your belly will growl again, and you'll remember. In ancient Rome, food was power,
and survival was a game of luck and cunning. As you settle in tonight, imagine yourself drifting through those streets, candlelight flickering on crumbling walls, the air thick with garlic and sweat, and the distant roar of the Colosseum echoing like a heartbeat in the dark. Your eyelids grow heavier as you wander deeper into Rome's labyrinth. You can almost hear the whispers of merchants hawking rancid olives and the clang of a blacksmith hammering late into the night. You might think that at least you could beg, as so many did. But be warned, Rome was not a kind place for the desperate. The streets were filled with mendicants, the professional beggars who guarded their corners jealously. Some even paid bribes to local thugs for the right to beg there. If you tried to plead for a crust of bread or a spoonful of pulse, you'd quickly feel the sharp shove of an elbow or the sting of a stick across your back. Perhaps you'd consider taking work. But labor was harsh and endless. You might join a team unloading grain sacks at the port of Ostia, your shoulders burning under the Roman sun. Or you might carry bricks to a new bath complex, your feet slipping in the mud, your hands raw from the rough clay. Wages were pitiful, and if you fell ill, no one would spare a thought for you. The wealthy had slaves for nearly everything: cooking, cleaning, tutoring their children, massaging their feet after dinner. You, a free but poor person, stood at the bottom of a strange hierarchy. You had freedom, but no security. A single bad day could mean starvation. Even if you managed to scrape together a few coins, the food might poison you before it nourished you. Sellers soaked old wine with chalk to stretch it, dyed spoiled meat to hide its decay, and added lead to sweeten rancid fruit preserves. Lead, the silent killer lurking in Roman cookware, water pipes, and even cosmetics. Slowly, invisibly, it crept into every organ, weakening bones and dulling minds. At night, as the oil lamps flickered and the city quieted to a low hum, your hunger might keep you awake, your stomach curling in on itself like a frightened animal. You might imagine the sweet relief of figs or a handful of lentils, but your reality would be the brittle bite of moldy barley. In the better quarters, you could catch the drifting aroma of roasted pork or honey cakes. The laughter of senators and courtesans would echo off the marble columns, almost mocking. Their banquets were spectacles: peacocks served with their feathers reassembled, eels fattened on milk, or even meals designed to make guests vomit so they could continue gorging. Meanwhile, you dream of even the simplest bean stew. Children fared no better. Many went barefoot, their feet tough as old leather. They gnawed on scraps, their bellies swollen not from fullness, but from malnutrition. Some sold flowers or trinkets to passers-by, hoping for a coin that might buy a handful of lupin beans. Others simply vanished into the alleys, their fates unrecorded. Women, too, bore the brunt of scarcity. While noble women experimented with perfumes and hair dyes, most women lined up at the communal mills at dawn, grinding whatever grain they could find. They inhaled clouds of flour dust, their backs bent, their fingers cracked and bleeding. Some carried their infants in slings, hoping their weak milk would last the day.
Imagine the noise, the rhythmic grind of stone mills, the squeal of a pig being butchered nearby, the distant roar of a chariot race. Rome never truly slept. But you, so used to your quiet bedroom and fridge glow, might find the constant din unbearable. Some nights, the city would seem almost magical. Lanterns floating above garden parties, the gentle plucking of a lyre, the scent of roses and incense drifting over the tiled roofs. You might glimpse a senator strolling in his toga,
half drunk on Falernian wine, boasting about his latest conquests in the Senate or the bedroom. But even these illusions of luxury would dissolve when dawn broke. The poor woke first, stomachs growling, eyes sunken. They trudged to stand in the bread line or scoured the markets for wilted vegetables left behind. You would join them, shoulders hunched, hoping to catch the smallest mercy from a distracted vendor. Perhaps you'd think, at least there's always fish. But beware the salsamentari, those fishmongers with their barrels of salted mackerel and pickled anchovies. The smell alone might drive you to nausea. The fish had often been sitting for days, crawling with flies, the salt crust hiding more than preserving. Despite the cruelty, the city pulsed with a hypnotic energy. You could feel it beneath your feet, an empire both magnificent and merciless, a place where marble temples stood beside rotting tenements, and where survival depended on luck, bribery, and a strong stomach. Tonight, as you slip deeper into your pillow, think of the warmth of your blanket, the quiet hum of a refrigerator nearby. Think of the freedom to choose, apples or grapes, fresh milk or warm bread, luxuries beyond the wildest dreams of a Roman plebeian. Yet in those flickering lamplight hours, some Romans surely gazed at the moon and longed for more, just like you do now.
You might think that even in such a world, you'd find a moment of rest. Perhaps you imagine curling up under a fig tree, or drifting to sleep lulled by the distant murmur of fountains. But in Rome, even your sleep would be a fragile, brittle thing. The tenements, those towering insulae, creaked and shifted with every gust of wind. The walls were so thin you could hear every cough, every whispered argument, every infant wail echoing through the night. Fires were constant fears. A single overturned oil lamp could reduce your entire block to glowing embers before dawn. You'd leap up barefoot onto cold tiles, stumble down dark stairwells slick with waste, and clutch your meager belongings to your chest, praying you made it out alive. And as the ashes settled, the question of food would loom again. You'd pick through the charred remains for anything, a shriveled onion, a half-burnt crust. The smell of wet soot mixing with roasted grain would hang in the air for days. If, somehow, you survived the fire, disease lurked everywhere. Without refrigeration or proper sanitation, meat and fish rotted quickly, and milk turned sour in hours. You might think you'd avoid illness by eating only vegetables and grains, but even these were often grown in fields fertilized with human waste, carrying parasites that gnawed at your insides. Diarrhea, fevers, mysterious swellings, these weren't rare. They were daily life. Doctors might arrive with bronze scalpels and herbal concoctions, but many treatments did more harm than good. You'd lie on your straw mattress, sweat pooling beneath you, staring at the cracked ceiling while your neighbors argued about the price of olive oil or the latest scandal in the Senate. In moments of relative calm, you might try to soothe your hunger with dreams. You'd remember the stories of grand banquets, emperors feasting on entire roast ostriches, or Nero dining beneath a ceiling that sprinkled rose petals on his guests. The petals seemed harmless until they suffocated people unlucky enough to get caught in the fragrant downpour. Ah, the sweet irony of dying under a shower of roses while your own stomach twisted empty in the night. And then there was the street food. Perhaps you'd grab a bowl of pulse from a corner stall, thick and salty, or a small pastry stuffed with dates, if you could afford it. But even these treats might leave you doubled over by moonlight, cursing the seller who had stretched yesterday's leftovers into today's profit. As you roamed through the Subura district, a chaotic tangle of taverns, brothels, and workshops, the city's duality becomes clearer. The poor shared cramped rooms, their lives a swirling mix of smells,
rancid cheese, cheap wine, sweat, and urine. Meanwhile, the rich dined in vast triclinium rooms, reclining on silk cushions while servants fanned them with peacock feathers. Women in pearls whispered scandalous secrets over honeyed nuts. Children of senators fed grapes to caged songbirds. In contrast, children in the streets gnawed on bones or sipped weak wine mixed with water because even clean water was suspect. The divide wasn't merely about luxury, it was about power, protection, and a chance to live another day. You might find a crust of bread today, but tomorrow the baker might decide not to open, or your meager coin might not be enough.
And what if you tried to leave the city? Beyond the walls, the countryside sprawled in a patchwork of dusty farms and wild groves. But there, too, the mighty latifundia, the massive estates owned by the ultra-rich, dominated. Enslaved laborers toiled endlessly, their backs bent under the hot sun, producing grain and olives that would feed distant villas rather than local mouths. You might stumble upon a roadside inn, hoping for shelter, but the food there would often be worse than in the city. Stale bread as hard as bricks, thin soups that tasted of ashes, and always the risk of bandits lurking in the dark, eager to rob a lone wanderer of the few coins or scraps they carried. You begin to realize how many ways there are to starve in Rome: by theft, by fire, by greed, by the casual cruelty of a society obsessed with spectacle and status. Even if you survived a day without hunger, another danger waited around each corner. Yet through it all, Rome throbbed with a kind of brutal beauty. The golden glow of dawn on marble columns, the echo of sandals in a quiet forum at night, the distant hymn from a temple at first light, fleeting moments that might trick you into hope. Tonight, as your breath slows and your thoughts drift, think of how many lives flickered and vanished in that city of 1,000,000 souls. Imagine holding a piece of gritty bread in your palm, the weight of it both a burden and a blessing. In your warm bed, safe and sated, you can close your eyes and wonder, what would you trade for one more day in that world despite its hunger? Or perhaps, would you trade anything at all?
The sun rises over Rome in a dusty haze, painting the city in shades of ochre and rose. You wake to the clamor of hawkers shouting, "Fresh figs! Olives! Cheap fish!" The noise is like a drumbeat, pushing you into another day of searching for something, anything to eat. Your legs ache from yesterday's wandering. Your head spins from the thin wine you drank to quiet your stomach's protests. You shuffle into the street, feet wrapped in worn leather sandals that scrape and flap with every step. A sweet aroma catches your nose. Honey cakes. You follow it with a kind of desperate longing, your mouth already watering. But when you reach the stall, you see the price, far beyond the coins hidden in your ragged belt. You linger, hoping for a dropped crumb, but the baker glares and shoos you away. Nearby, you spot a group of children playing with a ball made of rags. Their giggles echo in the morning air, but when they pause, you see the same hollowness in their eyes, the same sharpness in their cheeks. Hunger is their invisible playmate, always waiting nearby. You decide to try the public baths. Perhaps you can find a few scraps left behind by careless patrons. As you enter, the steamy air wraps around you like a damp blanket. You hear the splash of water, the low murmur of gossip, the sharp clack of dice against marble. The baths were a luxury in theory, but in reality they teemed with disease and filth. The water was rarely changed, and lice and skin infections spread easily. You might see a senator reclining in a hot pool, a slave scrubbing his back, while in a corner, a poor man coughs blood into his hands. If you're lucky, you might scavenge a few pieces of bread crust near the changing rooms, tossed aside by someone too full to finish. You chew them slowly, savoring every stale, hard bite as if it were a royal feast. Out in the streets again, you notice the grain dole line winding like a sluggish snake. You join the end, pressed shoulder to shoulder with old women, laborers, and orphans. The air reeks of sweat and despair. Every now and again, a scuffle breaks out. A man tries to push ahead. An old woman collapses, her legs unable to hold her any longer. Hours crawl by. When you finally reach the front, the clerk sneers at you, flicking his stylus dismissively. "No more today. Come back tomorrow." You stand frozen, a stone lodged in your throat, the promise of food snatched away in a single breath. You look around and see the fury in people's eyes, the kind that boils into riots. The city has seen countless grain riots. When hunger outweighs fear, even the mightiest empire trembles. But the guards stand nearby, armored and silent, their spears gleaming in the sun, ready to crush any hint of rebellion. Exhausted and defeated, you wander toward the Tiber River. The water glitters deceptively, masking its filth. You see fishermen gutting small fish, tossing guts and scales into the shallows. A boy wades in, scooping up scraps into a tattered cloth, his ribs a map of his suffering. You imagine yourself jumping into the river, letting its murky embrace pull you away from your gnawing hunger and the endless noise. But you don't. Something keeps you tethered, that flicker of hope, however fragile. In the evening, the city transforms again. Lanterns glow like fireflies, casting long, wavering shadows. You hear the faint echo of music from a distant villa, the lyre's tender notes mingling with drunken laughter. In the alleys, the poor gathered around small fires, sharing thin stews and stories. You edge closer to one group, hoping for an invitation. A woman ladles you a small portion, a watery mix of lentils and weeds. You sip it slowly, each mouthful a warm thread stitching your frayed spirit. Around the fire, someone sings a mournful song about a lost love. Another recites a scandal from the Senate. For a moment, you feel the warmth of human closeness, the illusion that you belong. Above you, the moon hangs heavy and bright. You wonder how many others stare at it tonight, empty-bellied and wide-eyed, whispering silent prayers to gods who never seem to answer. You realize how easily life could slip away here. A spoiled fish, a knife in a dark alley, a fever left untended. Every day survived is a quiet victory, a defiance against a city that seems designed to grind you down. And yet, there's a haunting beauty in this struggle. In every shared scrap, in every stolen laugh, in every star you glimpse between rooftops, you learn that life in Rome isn't just about surviving. It's about finding tiny moments of warmth amid the cold, small bites of sweetness amid the bitterness. Tonight, as your breath deepens and your eyelids grow heavy, imagine the soft crackle of that communal fire, the distant murmur of the Tiber, the gentle glow of the moon watching over you, and perhaps, just perhaps, you'll dream of a world where hunger no longer lingers at your side like a shadow. Tonight, as the last embers of the fires fade and the city settles into its uneasy sleep, you lie awake on your straw mat. The taste of the thin stew still lingers on your tongue, a fleeting warmth against the vast coldness of hunger.
The noises never really stop in Rome. Somewhere nearby, a donkey brays in the dark. A baby lets out a sharp, urgent cry, followed by the tired shushing of a mother who has no milk left to offer. Drunken laughter drifts down from an upper balcony, mixed with the clinking of bronze cups and the sweet, sticky smell of overripe figs. You hear the creak of a wooden wheel, a night soil collector pushing his cart through the alleys, gathering the waste of the wealthier homes. He hums a low, tuneless song to himself, the rhythm echoing in your chest. You envy even him. He has a purpose, a small, daily certainty, however foul. Your mind wanders to the grand feasts of the elites. Perhaps tonight a senator sits under a painted ceiling depicting Apollo chasing Daphne, the goddess transforming into a laurel tree. He plucks dates dipped in honey from a silver platter, his fingers sticky and careless. A slave pours spiced wine into a gold cup, the liquid catching the lantern light like a jewel. Meanwhile, you count each shallow breath, each flicker of torchlight, each soft footstep in the street below. In the morning, you wake to the sharp peal of the city bell calling laborers to the forum. You rise, bones heavy, muscles tight. The stale air clings to your skin, and you wrap your thin cloak tighter around your shoulders. Your stomach gnaws at you instantly. You might look for a patron, a wealthy citizen willing to toss a coin in exchange for a day's work or a flattering compliment in the atrium. But you know that even here, you're an outsider, a drifting ghost in a city of stone.
In the grand houses, the day begins with fresh bread, olives, cheese, and sweet wine. In yours, if you're lucky, you might find a handful of lucan beans soaked in brine, tough as pebbles and bitter on the tongue. You step outside and wander toward the Forum, the political heart of the empire. It gleams in the morning sun, marble columns towering like frozen waves. Senators in pure white togas glide past you, their heads held high, voices low and conspiratorial. You see merchants arguing over grain prices, lawyers gesturing wildly about debts and betrayals, and scribes hunched over wax tablets, capturing every whispered deal. The air crackles with ambition, with greed, with the scent of freshly bred you'll never taste. Your hunger feels like a living creature now, an invisible hand pulling at your ribs, twisting your insides. Nearby, a street performer balances on a rope, his face painted white. Children laugh and toss him crusts of bread, giggling as he wobbles. You watch, dizzy, and imagine snatching one of those crusts. But even that feels dangerous, humiliating. Further along, you spot a vendor selling mortem, a garlicky cheese spread pounded with herbs. Its aroma is so sharp it almost cuts your nose. But the vendor glares, guarding each clay bowl as though it contained the emperor's crown jewels. You turn away quickly, before your eyes betray your desperation. In the shadows, a group of enslaved workers trudge past, their ankles bound in iron. They carry heavy amphorae on their backs, heads bowed, eyes fixed on the ground. One stumbles, and a soldier strikes him with a rod, the crack echoing across the square. You flinch, your body curling instinctively inward. The city's beating heart runs on such cruelty. Food for the few, labor for the many, suffering for most. You see it everywhere. A woman nursing a sick child in the dust, an old man pawing through garbage for a carrot top, a young boy selling wilted flowers, his voice hoarse from calling out all day. Your own voice feels small,
swallowed by the din. You wonder if anyone would even notice if you simply slipped away into the alleys, never to return. But in some hidden corner of your spirit, there is still a faint spark. Perhaps it is hope, or maybe just stubbornness. That stubborn human desire to see another sunrise, to feel another stolen moment of warmth, to hold on to life, even when it bites you back. As dusk creeps in again, the marble columns blush pink and orange, and the streets begin to empty. The last merchants shout final prices, children are herded inside, and stray cats emerge to hunt scraps. You retreat to your corner, your blanket thin as a spider's web, and curl into yourself. Tonight, you feel the contrast more sharply than ever. The emperor feasting on dishes you cannot even name, while you cradle your own hunger like a restless child. Yet somehow, amid the ache and exhaustion, you marvel at the moonlight tracing lines on the cracked walls, at the hush that finally settles over the city, at the gentle murmur of life still persisting. And so you drift, your breathing slow, your thoughts hazy, wondering what small mercy tomorrow might bring.
Another morning, another slow, painful unraveling of your resolve. The city greets you not with kindness, but with a harsh chorus of shouts, clanging pots, and the rhythmic stomp of soldiers patrolling the streets. You rise from your blanket, your body stiff as old parchment. Your first thought is not of ambition, or love, or art. It is of food, always food, the single relentless refrain echoing in your mind like a chant. You shuffle toward the market again, passing under archways adorned with chipped frescoes, images of gods with serene faces and outstretched hands. Their painted eyes watch you silently, offering no bread, no warmth. At the market entrance, you see a line of women, their baskets empty, their gazes hollow. They argue with a vegetable seller over bruised turnips and worm-eaten cabbages. You squeeze closer, your nose filled with the sharp tang of vinegar and the sour rot of spoiled fruit. A man with a crooked back shouts about onions so pungent they could raise the dead. Another waves a knife over a slab of questionable meat, the flies buzzing in a shimmering hide. You gag, but you don't turn away. Hunger is stronger than disgust now. It erodes your pride, carves away your hesitation. Somewhere nearby, a priestess chants softly, tending a small shrine adorned with wilted garlands and broken clay figurines. You pause, watching the thin smoke coil upward, carrying whispered prayers to gods who seem as distant as the stars. You wonder if they ever listen, if they ever pity the gnawing bellies of mortals below. A sudden commotion snaps you back. A boy, no older than 10, is dragged from a stall, his tunic clutched tightly around a hidden fig. The vendor strikes him across the head, curses spilling like oil. The boy crumples, the fruit rolling into the dirt. You watch as the boy crawls after it, scoops it up, and disappears into the crowd, head low.
You keep moving. Each step feels heavier than the last, as if the city itself is pressing you down. You glimpse a patrician's litter carried by 4 sweating slaves, swaying like a gilded cradle. Inside, a woman reclines, fanning herself lazily, her hair coiled in intricate braids. Her eyes drift over you for a moment, empty, glassy, before sliding away. You are nothing to her, a ghost drifting through her lavish dream. You decide to try the temples next. On festival days, priests sometimes hand out food offerings to the poor, small cakes, figs, nuts. But today is not a festival. You see only pigeons pecking at leftover grain on the temple steps. You join them for a moment, fingers sifting through the dirty pebbles. You pick out a single grain, place it on your tongue, and close your eyes. Nearby, an orator stands on a stone platform, shouting about civic virtue and the glory of Rome. His voice booms, echoing off marble, drawing a small crowd. You watch his animated gestures, the spittle at the corner of his mouth, the bright red of his cloak. But his words slide past you like water. You hear only the creak of your empty stomach. A girl stands beside you, clutching a thin shawl around her shoulders. She leans in and whispers, "Sometimes they throw coins at the end." Her eyes dart nervously. You nod, though you know most of the coins will go to the orator's supporters or vanish into the pockets of stronger hands. Hours pass, the crowd disperses, leaving only dust and discarded olive pits. The girl vanishes, swallowed by the labyrinth valleys. You sit alone on the steps, the sun dipping lower, turning the sky into a smear of blood and gold. The night air grows cool. You feel your skin tighten, your breath puffing in small clouds. Fires flicker to life again in the tenements, shadows dancing like silent phantoms on the walls. You rise, joints crackling, and wander toward a small courtyard fountain. You cup the water carefully, avoiding the floating grime and stray feathers. Each sip feels like a fragile promise that maybe, just maybe, you will make it to another dawn. Above you, the stars prick the sky, each one a distant, icy witness to your struggle. You wonder if any of them hold the gaze of a Roman soldier far away, or a mother waiting for her son to return from the fields. In this vast city of marble and mud, so many lives thread past each other like silent ships in a dark sea. You think of the emperors and senators, of their perfumed halls and golden banquets, and you feel a strange, slow-burning warmth in your chest. Anger, maybe, or a longing too old to name. Yet, as you curl up again in your corner, beneath a broken arch, you find a quiet defiance inside you. Even with an empty stomach, even in the cold, you are here. You breathe. You watch the stars. You remember the sweetness of figs and the salt of tears. Sleep tugs at you, gentle and insistent, wrapping you in a soft, dark cloak. You slip under, drifting between this harsh world and your dreams, where bread is soft and warm, and you are always, always full. As dawn's first pale fingers creep over the city, you awake with a dull ache spreading through your bones. It feels as if the hunger has seeped into your marrow, making each breath heavier, each thought slower. You rise and stretch, your joints crackling like dry twigs. Around you, Rome begins to stir. A cart creaks past, loaded with amphorae of sour wine. A baker trudges toward his oven, a trail of flour dusting the ground behind him like ghostly footprints. You slip into the moving tide of people, each face worn thin by need and worry. The city seems to breathe in unison, a collective sigh of survival. At the Forum, a crowd gathers to watch a public execution. You hesitate, but your empty belly propels you forward. You know that sometimes, after such spectacles, vendors sell cheap bread to draw the restless crowd. You force your way to the edge. A man stands on a platform, pale and trembling, accused of stealing grain from a noble's warehouse. The guards shove him to his knees. You avert your eyes, but you hear every sharp cry, every heavy thud. The crowd shouts and jeers, their faces alive with cruel excitement. You feel your pulse hammering in your throat, and then the smell hits you. Fresh bread, still steaming. You move instinctively toward the scent, your feet barely touching the ground. At a small stall, you see loaves stacked in rough piles. The baker, sweat dripping from his forehead, slices chunks for eager hands. You press forward, coins clenched tight, praying they're enough. When you finally reach him, you thrust your hand out, heart galloping. The baker snatches your coins and slaps a piece of bread into your palm without a word. You stagger back, staring at it as if it were a sacred relic. The crust is rough and dark, the smell sharp and sour, but to you, it is salvation.
You find a quiet alcove between two columns and tear into the bread. It scrapes your gums, crumbles into gritty clumps, and carries the faint, bitter taste of ashes. Still, it is a feast beyond imagining. As you chew, you watch a woman pass with a basket of wilted greens and a boy trailing her, tugging at her skirt. A toothless old man hobbles by, holding a small clay cup and whispering for alms. Every face is a small universe of hardship, of tiny daily battles against a city that devours its children without remorse. A sudden gust of wind blows dust and bits of straw around you. You pull your cloak tighter and look up. The marble temples gleam coldly in the morning sun. Statues of Jupiter and Mars stand aloof, silent witnesses to all this hunger, all this clawing need. You finish your bread slowly, savoring every coarse mouthful. It leaves your throat dry and your belly still restless, but a part of the gnawing emptiness quiets for now. You lean back, letting the sun warm your face, eyes drifting shut. In that brief lull, you imagine what it might feel like to be full, truly full. To sit at a villa table surrounded by platters of roasted lamb, honey-soaked pastries, and bowls of glossy olives. You picture yourself lifting a goblet of sweet wine, feeling its warmth bloom in your chest.
But then the wind changes, carrying the rank stench of garbage, and the dream crumbles. You open your eyes to the cracked columns and the echo of sandals slapping against stone. Later, you wander toward the Circus Maximus, drawn by the distant roar of the crowd. You slip inside, unnoticed among the throng. The chariot races thunder past, clouds of dust rising like ghosts. The people scream, drunk on excitement, betting coins they can't spare. Vendors weave through the seats, hawking nuts, sausages, cheap wine. You watch the food pass, close enough to smell, but always just beyond reach. You lick your cracked lips, the taste of the rough bread already a fading memory. Near you, a man drops a handful of chestnuts. You lunge forward, snatch one before it rolls away, and pop it into your mouth. It is stale and slightly moldy, but you close your eyes and imagine it sweet and rich. When the race ends, the crowd spills out like a river breaking its banks. You drift with them, carried by the swell of bodies, each person clutching a few coins, a bruised fruit, or nothing at all. As night falls, lanterns flicker to life, throwing thin golden light onto the streets. You find yourself back in your usual corner, the sounds of laughter and distant music swirling around you like a cruel lullaby. You wrap your cloak tighter, curling into the shallow warmth of your own breath. You think of the bread you managed to buy today, the chestnut you stole, and the countless others who didn't get even that small mercy. Your eyelids grow heavy, your mind drifting through images of moonlit banquets, empty bowls, and ghostly columns. And just before sleep claims you, a single thought glows faintly in the dark. That even in a city of endless hunger, small victories, a crust of bread, a stolen nut, a moment of sun on your face, are precious beyond measure.
As the moon slides across the ink-black sky, you stir from your shallow sleep. Your dreams were restless, fragments of laughter echoing in marble halls, the cold gleam of bronze armor, the sharp tang of vinegar-soaked greens. You awaken with that same dull, familiar ache coiling in your belly. Tonight, the city feels quieter, almost reverent. You listen to the distant clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the low murmur of two lovers arguing in a nearby doorway. Somewhere, a stray dog howls, its voice a trembling thread in the darkness. You rise and stretch your thin arms, your cloak slipping from your shoulders. You feel the chill immediately, as if the city's stones were breathing frost into your bones. In the faint lantern light, you decide to roam. You pass under crumbling arches, past the yawning doorways of taverns where a few stragglers still sip sour wine, their laughter slurred and broken. You drift further, pulled by some silent instinct. You find yourself near the river again, the Tiber whispering secrets to the moon. You watch its dark surface ripple and catch shards of starlight. In the shallows, a woman rinses a ragged tunic, her hands raw and red. You see her pause, lift her head toward the moon and sigh, a sound so soft it could almost be a prayer. Nearby, a group of fishermen huddle around a small brazier. They pass around a battered flask, their voices low and rough. You inch closer, drawn by the faint scent of charred fish. One man notices you and gestures with a weary hand. You hesitate, then shuffle forward.
He tosses you a small scrap, a piece of fish skin, blackened and tough. You thank him with a weak nod, clutching it as though it were a golden coin. You chew it slowly, savoring every hint of salt and smoke. Even as your teeth struggle against the leathery texture, it feels like a gift from the gods. When the fishermen pack up, they leave behind a few stray fish heads and bones. You kneel, searching carefully, finding a fragment of meat here, a soft eye there. You eat it all, the brine stinging your cracked lips. You glance up and see the fishermen fading into the night, their lanterns swaying like a slow heartbeat. You move on, your mind foggy but your steps somehow lighter. You wander into a small courtyard garden belonging to a senator's house. The gate stands ajar, perhaps left open by a careless servant. You slip inside, your heart pounding like a war drum. By moonlight, you see rows of fig trees and flowering shrubs. The smell of jasmine drifts through the air, delicate and haunting. You search frantically, fingers grazing the cool earth, until you find a fallen fig beneath a tree. You clutch it as though it might vanish. The skin is bruised, the flesh soft and oozing. You bite in, and the sweetness explodes on your tongue, rich, heady, almost intoxicating. You close your eyes, your whole body leaning into the moment. For a heartbeat, you are not a beggar, not a ghost slipping through Rome's alleys. You are simply alive, tasting the sweetness of a night stolen from another world. But soon you hear voices, guards perhaps, or slaves returning from some late errand. You slip back into the shadows, heart thudding in your ears, and slip out the gate just before a lantern swings toward you. You flee down the alleys, your pulse like the pounding of distant drums. When you finally stop, you're panting, your cloak soaked with sweat despite the cold. You sink to the ground, back against a wall, eyes turned upward. Above you, the stars blaze with indifferent clarity. You think of the senators dining in lamplit gardens, their children asleep under soft woolen blankets, their tables heavy with platters of roasted pheasant and honey cakes. You think, too, of the countless others, mothers, children, old men, curled in corners, whispering silent bargains to the gods for one more crust, one more dawn. And in that fragile, shimmering moment, you feel a kind of unity with them all. The rich in their marble halls, the poor in their straw nests, each of you carrying hunger in different shapes, each searching for warmth in the chill of the empire's great shadow. As you wrap your cloak tighter and nestle into the crook of the wall, your eyelids drift down. The taste of the fig lingers on your tongue like a soft echo of summer, a reminder of sweetness in a world that so often tastes of ash. You breathe in slowly, deeply, as though you might hold this small victory forever. And somewhere, deep inside, a quiet vow forms, to wake again, to fight again, to taste life even when it cuts like a blade.
Morning creeps into the city like a timid visitor, brushing shadows from the alleys and painting the stones in soft, gray light. You wake slowly, feeling the dew clinging to your cloak, the dampness seeping into your bones. Your tongue still remembers the ghost of last night's fig, a sweet dream against the relentless march of hunger. You stretch and stand, your joints protesting. Around you, Rome is already humming to life. Somewhere, a rooster crows weakly, answered by the clang of hammers in the smithies. You smell smoke from early fires, the faint crackle of bread baking in clay ovens. Your steps carry you toward the Subura district, the maze of narrow streets where the poorest and the boldest scrape together their days. Here, life feels raw and urgent. Vendors call out over each other, boys chase stray dogs, and women gossip in doorways as they sweep dust from thresholds that never truly stay clean. You pass a group of slaves dragging a heavy millstone, their shoulders hunched like oxen, sweat already pouring down their backs. One slips, the stone nearly crushing his foot. A nearby overseer raises a whip, but the man scrambles up just in time. You watch silently, your fingers curling against your palms, the urge to help snuffed out by the knowledge that you too are barely surviving. At a corner stall, a woman sells thin porridge, pulse, the humble dish of the masses. You approach, eyes locked on the pot, steam curling into the cool air. She ladles a small portion into a chipped bowl, and you hand over your last coins without a word.
The porridge is bland, a mush of barley and maybe a hint of greens. But it slides down your throat warm, filling the hollow inside you, if only for a moment. You close your eyes, letting your mind wander to a banquet table, to a garden bursting with fruit, to a dream of abundance so distant it shimmers like a mirage. Nearby, a scrawny dog noses through a pile of refuse, pulling out a fish spine. You lock eyes with it for a heartbeat. Two creatures gnawed by the same relentless hunger. You watch as it trots away, tail low, but moving forward. After your meal, you wander aimlessly. You find yourself drawn toward the baths again. Even if you don't enter, you can sit near the walls where warm water sometimes leaks into small rivulets. You dip your fingers into the trickling warmth, imagining for a moment that you are inside, being scrubbed by a slave, your skin perfumed with oil and myrrh. Instead, you are here, half hidden in the steam and the murmur of voices inside. A group of young nobles strides past you, towels draped casually over their shoulders. They laugh loudly, oblivious to your thin shape in the shadows. You watch them disappear, carrying with them a world you'll never enter.
As the afternoon drifts by, you walk to the edge of the city walls. There, farmers arrive with carts of wilted vegetables and bruised fruits. You watch them barter and argue, some coins clinking, others slipping quietly from hand to hand.
You spot a pile of discarded carrot tops and cabbage leaves trampled into the mud. You kneel and gather a few handfuls, ignoring the stares of those who pass. You brush off as much dirt as you can and chew slowly. The taste is bitter and earthy, but it quiets the gnawing inside you. A merchant passing by snorts in disgust. Like a goat, he mutters to his companion. You lower your eyes, feeling the flush of shame rise to your cheeks, but you keep chewing. As the sun tips low and shadows lengthen, you make your way back toward the crowded heart of the city. Lanterns flicker to life one by one, each a small island of light in the deepening dusk. You hear the chants from a nearby temple, prayers to Mercury for fortune, to Ceres for a good harvest, to Vesta for the protection of hearth and home. You pause, listening. The words roll over you like a gentle wave, almost comforting. You murmur a small prayer of your own, not for wealth or glory, but simply for another day, another breath, another crumb. In a nearby alley, a girl offers you a small piece of dried fig. You accept it with a trembling hand, whispering thanks. She smiles shyly and vanishes into the crowd, leaving you with the sweet stickiness clinging to your teeth. You savor it slowly, each bite a small defiance against the empire's vast hunger. As the stars begin to bloom above the city, you find your familiar corner and settle down. The sounds of Rome become a lullaby. The shuffle of sandals, the soft call of a distant flute, the crackle of a hidden hearth. You close your eyes, feeling the warmth of the day's small victories, a bowl of porridge, a handful of greens, a stolen fig, and the shared kindness of a stranger. In the darkness behind your eyelids, you dream of gardens heavy with fruit, rivers flowing with milk and honey, and tables where no one ever leaves hungry.
You wake in the small hours before dawn, when the city is at its most vulnerable and tender. The stars are still bright, a soft scattering of silver above the silent rooftops. Your breath ghosts in the chill air, each exhale a small, fragile promise to keep moving forward. Your body feels heavier than ever, each limb a reluctant companion. But hunger is a harsh master. It drags you up, pushes you into the slow river of morning. You move through streets still littered with last night's refuse, broken amphorae, wilted garlands, puddles of spilled wine gone sticky and dark. Cats prowl between shadows, their eyes glowing like embers as they sniff for scraps. You envy them, their sharp claws, their quiet cunning, their freedom to slip away unseen. As you wander, you pass the remains of a street feast from the night before. Someone celebrated, perhaps a wedding or the victory of a favored charioteer. You see bones picked clean, bits of burnt bread, pomegranate rinds staining the stones red like drops of spilled blood. You stoop to gather what you can. A few crumbs cling to a plate. A sliver of fish skin curls against a tile. You gather them carefully, each piece a tiny treasure, a fragment of someone else's joy. A man emerges from a nearby doorway, bleary-eyed, reeking of sour wine. He watches you for a moment, his expression somewhere between pity and disgust, before he turns away with a grunt and disappears into the darkness. With your meager findings, you retreat to a hidden corner near a fountain. You crouch, knees drawn to your chest, and eat slowly. The crumbs dissolve almost as quickly as your breath, but you press your tongue to your teeth, savoring every last ghost of flavor.
In the pale dawn, a funeral procession glides past. Mourners in dark cloaks shuffle by, faces shrouded. A woman beats her chest rhythmically, her wails sharp and raw. You watch in silence, thinking of how close life and death always walk together here, like old friends. You move again, drifting toward the Aventine Hill. Here, olive groves stretch in ragged lines, their silver leaves trembling in the breeze. You slip between them, searching the ground for fallen fruit. Your fingers close around a half-rotten olive. The skin is wrinkled, the flesh bitter and sharp. Still, you eat it, eyes closed against the tears that rise unbidden. Further along, you find a fig tree leaning over a crumbling wall. You climb, your legs shaking, fingers scrabbling at the rough stone. At the top, you reach for a small bruised fig, soft and bursting at the seams. You pluck it with trembling hands and bring it to your lips, the sweetness flooding your senses in a sudden dizzying rush. For a heartbeat, you forget the ache in your limbs, the hollow behind your ribs. You are simply here, alive, savoring a gift snatched from the jaws of the city's hunger. Descending carefully, you slip into a small shrine tucked into the wall below. Inside, a tiny oil lamp flickers, its flame a lonely sentinel. Offerings lie scattered, a few nuts, a smear of honey on a clay dish, a sprig of rosemary. You leave a small piece of your fig, a silent thank you to whatever spirit might be listening. As the sun climbs higher, the city roars to life. Merchants call, carts creak, dogs bark, soldiers bark orders. You slip among them like a shadow, unseen, but always moving. At the edge of the forum, you find a crowd clustered around a traveling healer. He waves jars of colored powders, promising cures for hunger, for heartbreak, for curses from jealous neighbors. You watch skeptically as coins pass from trembling hands to his eager fingers. You know no powder can banish the ache in your belly. Only food can do that. Real, solid, tangible. You drift away, leaving the charlatan's cries behind. You pass a group of children chasing each other with shrill laughter. One pauses, stares at you, then runs off again. Their joy cuts through you, both beautiful and cruel, a reminder of a softness you can barely remember. Near the Capitoline Hill, you pause to watch a group of slaves unload sacks of grain. Their arms strain, ropes dig into their shoulders. Sweat shines on their skin. The overseer shouts, whip in hand, but they move with grim steadiness. You feel a strange kinship with them, both of you bound to the same desperate rhythm of survival. As evening nears, you wander back toward the alleys, your cloak tugged close. The lanterns begin to glow, tiny golden orbs against the deepening blue. You slip into your usual corner, feeling the day's weight settle into your bones like cold water. You close your eyes and think of the fig, of the olive groves swaying in the wind, of the quiet shrine and its small, flickering flame. You think of how each small bite, each stolen sweetness is a tiny rebellion against a world that tries so hard to starve you into silence. And, as the hush of night folds over you, you breathe out a slow, shivering sigh. Tomorrow will come, with all its sharp teeth and small mercies, but for now, you drift into the dark, holding on to the warmth of that single, perfect fig.
The city stirs once more, restless even before the sun has fully crested the horizon. You wake to the soft scuffle of sandals against stone, the murmur of voices rising like a hesitant chorus. Each morning feels like a rebirth, but not the gentle, divine kind, more like crawling out from under a collapsed roof, bruised and blinking into the harsh light. Your breath rattles in your chest as you stand,
your cloak heavy with damp. The alley around you is littered with broken pottery shards, olive pits, and the curled leaves of vegetables too wilted for even the pigs. You nudge through it all, hoping for a hidden crumb, a forgotten fig stem, a stray bean. Near the forum, you find a small crowd gathering around a makeshift stage. A poet stands atop a crate, arms flung wide, his voice echoing off the marble facades. He recites verses about Rome's greatness, her eternal power, her divine right to rule. You watch, hollow-eyed, as he soars through his performance, each word dripping with pride and splendor. The audience claps and laughs, tossing him coins and crusts of bread. You feel a faint tug of jealousy. He eats from words alone, while you comb the gutters for survival. When he finishes, he bows deeply, and the crowd disperses. You approach his crate, and your eyes catch a stray piece of flatbread left behind by an admirer. You snatch it quickly, heart thudding, and scurry away before anyone notices. You chew the bread slowly, feeling each bite echo through the empty cathedral of your stomach. It tastes faintly of dust and sweat, but also of triumph, a stolen victory in a city that offers so few.
You move toward the baths again, drawn by the warmth leaking from the walls. You press your palms against the stone, feeling the gentle heat seep into your icy fingers. You imagine slipping inside, letting hot water swirl around your limbs, the oil massages, the scent of lavender and myrtle. But you remain outside, a ghost at the feast, content with the moment of warmth against the cold bite of dawn. Nearby, a bread vendor arranges his loaves into neat stacks. You watch him with sharp eyes, noting each movement. You see a rat scurry past, startling the vendor just enough to make him drop a piece. You move quickly, snatching it before the rat can double back. The vendor curses and swings at the rat, never noticing you vanish into the alley. You bite into the crusty edge, your jaw straining against its toughness, but you relish it all the same. Later, you wander to the edge of the Aventine Hill. From here, you can see the whole city sprawling below you, red-tiled roofs glinting in the sun, white columns catching the first golden light, columns rising like frozen waves. You smell smoke from 1,000 hearths, each one a small fortress against hunger. A group of children runs past you, chasing a rolling hoop, their laughter bright and shrill. You pause to watch them, feeling the echo of your own long-forgotten childhood deep in your bones. You can almost remember that feeling, a full belly, soft hands, a mother's gentle humming in the dark. You turn away before the memory can bloom fully, before it can hurt you more. Below, at the foot of the hill, a group of women kneel beside a public oven, baking coarse loaves for their families. The smell wafts up to you, making your mouth water painfully. You wander down slowly, as if pulled by an invisible hand.
You linger near the oven, inhaling deeply. One woman, seeing your thin frame and hollow eyes, hesitates. She tears a small piece from a loaf and passes it to you silently. You take it with both hands, bowing your head in gratitude so deep it almost feels like prayer. You eat it as though it were the finest delicacy, each chew deliberate, your eyes closing as warmth spreads through your chest. You feel, for a moment, almost human again. The sun climbs higher, and the city shimmers in its harsh brilliance. You find a shaded archway to rest under, your back against cool stone. You watch the endless dance of Rome, soldiers barking at traitors, senators gliding past in togas as bright as marble, slaves bearing baskets of fruit and jugs of water, children darting through crowds like sparrows.
Everywhere, the same undercurrent. Hunger disguised in 1,000 ways. Greed for power, thirst for wine, longing for love. You see it reflected back at you in every eye. As dusk crawls over the city, you close your eyes. You think of the woman at the oven, of the fig trees, of the stolen bread and the warmth of the bath walls. Tiny mercies in an empire that rarely grants them. Tonight, as you drift into that tender in-between space of sleep, you hold tight to those moments, the scraps and the kindnesses, the warmth and the small stolen sweetness. And as your breath evens, you imagine a Rome where no one is left to starve in the shadows.
You wake to the soft gray light of dawn creeping over the city's rooftops like a shy visitor. The air is still, holding its breath before the day's noise rises again. You lie there for a moment, your eyes tracing the slow swirl of a spider's web in the corner, the delicate threads catching the first trembling rays of sun. You feel the echoes of all the days behind you, the figs and olives, the stolen crusts, the stray kindnesses that have stitched your heart back together again and again. Your belly is empty, but inside, something deeper hums, a quiet, stubborn ember of life. You rise carefully, feeling the sharpness of your bones under your skin, the thinness of your legs, the gentle ache in your shoulders. You step out into the city's waking breath, the stones cool beneath your feet, the air tinged with ash, wine, and rosemary. Today, you do not rush to the markets or scan the ground for scraps. Instead, you move slowly, savoring each face you pass, the old woman laying flower petals on a doorstep, the vendor sweeping seeds from his stall, the child perched on a wall, humming to the pigeons below. You drift toward the river, the Tiber shimmering under the rising sun, its slow, secret music calling you closer. You watch the water curl and catch the light, the gentle waves carrying fragments of distant worlds, bits of reed, pieces of broken amphorae, memories of feasts and funerals alike.
A fisherman nearby struggles with a small net, his brow furrowed. You watch as he finally pulls it up, revealing just a few thin fish, glinting like tiny stars. He notices your gaze and, after a long pause, gestures to you. You approach slowly. With rough hands, he picks out the smallest fish and holds it toward you, his eyes soft and unreadable. You take it carefully, cradling it as though it were a precious jewel. You meet his gaze, and for a breath, there is no city, no empire, only two souls sharing a silent understanding. You thank him with a hand pressed to your heart, and he nods, turning back to the river's endless hush. You walk away, your steps slow and reverent. You stop at a low stone wall, sit and eat the fish in small, careful bites. Each mouthful is a tiny pulse of warmth, a final blessing folded into the morning. Afterwards, you rest there, the sun rising higher, its light brushing your cheeks gently as a mother might touch a child's hair. You close your eyes, and for the first time in many dawns, you feel no sharp stab of fear for the coming day. Instead, you feel a strange fullness, not in your belly, but in the quiet spaces inside your ribs, in the corners of your mind that once ached with loneliness. You feel the softness of the fig, the salt of olives, the sweetness of apples, the warmth of hidden crusts. You feel the kindness of strangers, like a quilt draped around your shoulders.
You open your eyes and look at the city spread before you.
its rooftops shimmering, its alleys humming with life, its marble temples glowing like pale ghosts of old dreams. You see it all, in its cruelty and its quiet, unexpected beauty. You rise at last, your breath steady, your steps light. You turn away from the river and begin to walk, not toward a market, not toward a scrap pile, but simply forward. You carry no food today, only memory, only the soft echo of all you have survived. Tonight, when you find your corner and wrap yourself in your thin cloak, you will not feel empty. You will close your eyes and see gardens heavy with fruit, hear laughter echoing across moonlit courtyards, feel the warmth of 1,000 unseen hands lifting you from the dust. And as sleep takes you, you will whisper to the night, to the stars, to every quiet kindness that ever found you, "Thank you. I am still here." Good night, traveler of old streets. May your dreams be full, your spirit light, and your heart always carried forward by small mercies.